I'm Dan Larson, and since December of 2017, there's been a lot of speculation as to where, when, and how Marvel's X-Men and Fantastic Four franchises are going to be rolled into the Marvel Cinematic Universe after Disney announced that they had reached an agreement to purchase a whole bunch of assets belonging to 21st Century Fox. More recently than that, Comcast has been positioning themselves to beat the offer Disney made, since the deal between Disney and Fox isn't actually completed yet, and at the earliest, wouldn't be done until sometime in 2019 as it awaits potential regulatory approval. Comcast has been saving their money, biding their time, while all parties involved wait to see if the other potential multimedia mega corporation merger of Time Warner and AT&T gets regulatory approval before moving forward. There's a lot to be gained for Disney, Marvel, and the fans with respect to seeing characters together for the first time on screen, sure. But will that even matter if you're not interested enough to even go to the theater to see it? In a different timeline, Marvel never sells off the movie rights of different characters to different studios. The X-Men and Fantastic Four aren't at Fox, Spider-Man isn't at Sony, all Marvel characters belong to a single owner, just like the DC properties have always been together at Warner Brothers. But we don't live in that timeline. With the continued success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the goal has always been to get to a point where all Marvel characters would be brought back together once Marvel had the means to buy the rights back. A purchase of Fox by Disney is correcting the timeline, allowing things to be the way they should have been from the beginning. With a purchase of the Fox properties, Disney and Marvel would be in the position to execute their shared universe even further, incorporating even more of the most beloved characters, broadening the scope of the world, bringing it even closer to the world that they've created in the comics since the 60s. More characters, bigger battles, it's the toy box come to life, the greatest moments of the comics now achievable on screen. It's a strategy that has been very successful, both for the exposure of the brands and just straight dollars at the register, which is really the only metric that matters. They have made a lot of money, and for the most part, people seem to like them. At what point does the market reach saturation? Has it already? At what point is each film just delivering the next plot point of the overall story instead of developing the individual characters and world of its own because they aren't the real focus? At what point do the individual films become so formulaic in their production and delivery that they cease to be a must-see in person as soon as possible experience on their own, as opposed to the next long teaser for the real product, which is still 10 years away? Why even give them different names? Just call them Marvel Chapter 6, Marvel Chapter 10, etc. It's hard to separate the larger industry implications of a Disney-Fox merger from the selfish fan interest parts. Yeah, I want to see Captain America and Wolverine fight. Yeah, I want to see the Fantastic Four and the Avengers and Alpha Flight fighting Doctor Doom. But shared universe means shared expectations of that universe. Creators can't stray too far away from the world as it exists because it has to be the same world that exists in all of the films. The difficulty goes up every time you introduce a new batch of characters. There are more limitations to creative interpretation because everyone needs to be generally on the same page, and that can be a bad thing. Shared universe is one thing, one-note universe is another. Does anyone really want every movie they see to be a tonal copy of every other movie produced by the studio? There is precedent for a single company owning all of their characters and it being a hindrance to creativity. DC Comics characters have always been together under the ownership of Warner Brothers. It wasn't until Marvel had success with a shared universe that Warner Brothers made the attempt to fast-track their own version of what Marvel was doing. They skipped the standalone films for everyone except Superman and rushed them into a crossover, because the assumption was that a shared universe is the ideal state. The template that exists in the comics should automatically apply to the movies. It was assumed that there should always be some attempt to make films interconnected and crossing over. One big, impenetrable story that gets harder for new viewers to follow with each successive film and will be told forevermore. For DC, the result was too many characters trying to share the limited amount of screen time, and no character had much room for development, even though several of them were making their cinematic debut. I'm not here to call Justice League a failure. I can't do that to a film that made $650 million worldwide. But the suits at Warner Brothers called it a failure that capped off a trend that began with Man of Steel that they were not happy with. Batman vs. Superman and Justice League did what the Joker, Penguin, and Bane never could. They made Batman irrelevant. Batman can pull $1 billion worldwide by himself. Adding him to a crew like the Justice League reduced his draw from a financial standpoint, and from a character standpoint reduced him to, well, me, since we were basically both doing the same thing, watching the other heroes fight when it came time to take on Steppenwolf. What if Batman wasn't owned by DC and could still be producing a standalone franchise making $1 billion worldwide by himself? DC and Warner Brothers are reassessing the whole shared universe strategy and thinking that maybe it would be better to go back to individual franchises, bring in creators with a vision and their own voice on a character, concentrate on making several strong franchises as opposed to trying to make everything fit together. We are at a turning point that could potentially see an exchange of position in the movie landscape, with the 10-year culmination of Marvel's shared universe and the potential for the shared concept to get even deeper with the next phase, the first phase of the post-Infinity Stone era. Marvel will be looking to lay the foundation for a new long-term threat to build up to, and potentially trying to roll in all the new characters from Fox if that deal goes through. Every plot for every film that is set down will have to have something to do with whatever the new big threat is. Skrulls, Brood, the Return of Hydra, Doctor Doom, Galactus, whatever that new threat is, every single Marvel movie that gets released over the next decade will have to tie into it, whether they do get the X-Men or not. That already limits the creative direction of every film to a specific place and moment in time that they have to get to. Marvel already took away a proper third act of the Captain America film trilogy by shoehorning in Spider-Man, Black Panther, and every other character in the Marvel Universe at that point. It was no longer about what the best choices were to advance Captain America's story, but setting up moments that Captain America was going to be a participant in. What does a third Captain America movie look like if it doesn't have to introduce all that larger shared universe stuff? I'm not saying Civil War is a bad movie, but is it better or worse if you also had the X-Men and Fantastic Four in there? I'm going to try to avoid spoilers here, but there are highly significant character and mythology developments in Thor Ragnarok that are either completely undone or outright ignored by Infinity War. Was that the right choice for those characters crossing over from Ragnarok? Was that the right choice for the overall brand of Marvel? Or was it just what had to happen because Infinity War was more important than Thor? I'm far more interested in the Thor movie that could have happened post-Ragnarok than the one that happens post-Infinity War so far. What happens if Comcast ends up owning the X-Men and Fantastic Four and Alpha Flight instead of Disney? In theory, you could get a timeshare program the way Sony is working with Spider-Man, or you could continue to have a batch of Marvel superhero films that can just focus on what the creators are attempting to deliver with that film. You could potentially have more risk-taking, more genre-stretching pieces like Logan and Deadpool, things that can absolutely exist on their own without having to know where Captain America is or why Thor isn't helping out. You could have another studio in the mix, pushing Warner Brothers and Disney to stay on their toes, to put the best product out there, to keep trying to innovate, taking different risks, and making different choices that can't be made by the other studios. Look, I can't bring myself to say that Comcast is a better choice than Disney as far as huge media conglomerate mergers go. It's all bigger than I can wrap my head around, and I don't make any money from either deal. But I do know that if Disney can't close the deal and the X-Men aren't part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then hopefully we can still live in a world with some pretty cool Marvel movies that just don't happen to include the Avengers, Spider-Man, or Howard the Duck. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you aren't already a subscriber. Share this video. There's plenty for everyone. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy and let us know down in the comments how you would like to see the X-Men rolled into the MCU. Start at the beginning, Professor X and the First Class Kids, Cyclops, Jean, Hank, Warren, Bobby, or pick it up with the Wolverine and Storm era. I'm down for a small team like the first Bryan Singer X-Men squad, Wolverine, Storm, Cyclops, Colossus, Jean, Nightcrawler, then break the team in half and spin off X-Factor with the original X-Men. Does that work?
It's too complicated.
Can we get them on the phone?
Yeah.